Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, let me thank you all for taking your time to listen to my presentation. I'm glad for many of you could make it today. Before we begin, let me introduce myself briefly. My name is Novi Aurannisa and you can call me Aura, and I am a student of Islamic Education Department of UIN Malang. As you can see on the screen, our topic today is strategies for internalization of Islamic values in schools. We began by presenting the understanding of the internalization of Islamic values. Then I will continue by explaining about a process in internalization of Islamic values, and finally I will explain about strategies of Islamic internalization in school. Presentation will take about 15 or 20 minutes, and don't worry about the handout because I'll be handing out copies of the PowerPoint slides at the end of my talk. And if you have any question, feel free to interrupt me at any time. And for those who have another questions, there will be the time for questions after my presentation. Okay, so let's start it. The internalization of Islamic religious education values is necessary in breaking down problems in the world of Islamic education as a guideline in conducting teaching action. A teacher must learn the internalization of Islamic religious education values so that in his teaching, the students become virtuous and noble and understand these in teachings of Islamic religious education. This part of my presentation, I would like to tell about the understanding of the internalization of Islamic values. Internalization is essentially a process of instilling an individual or individual's beliefs, attitudes, and values that then becomes social behavior. But the planting process grows from within a person to the delusion of a value. Etymologically, internalization indicates a process. In the Great Dictionary of Indonesian Language, as known as KPBI, internalization is defined as delusion, deepening, deep mastery that takes place through construction, guidance, and so on. The result of this internalization will be permanently embedded in a person. Thus, the internalization of values is a process of instilling certain values that are the driving force for a person to act on the basis of his or her choice. Thus, internalization is a process of inner growth or spiritual learning. Let's move on the next point. A process in internalization of Islamic values. There are several processes so that religious values can be internalized by students in order to create a religious atmosphere in the school. The first name is exemplary approach. This approach is important because the intended goal is young students who are reviewed from moral development still requiring a cast or moral actor. Moreover, students for elementary school obviously the feature of the teacher is everything, both in perceived goodness like polite, attentive, humorous, and so on, as well as his ugliness like to be angry, yelling, terror, and so on. And the second is experience approach. In this approach, students are used in religious experiences until if the scars in their lives. Whether their influence is small or smaller, large or much on their daily behavior. For example, every student is obliged to perform duha prayer, read the Quran together every morning before the lesson begins, and extra. For a rather long cycle, for example, students are obliged to perform Friday prayers together in the school environment. visit orphanages, uh, orphanages and extra. While long cycles, for example, students are obliged to follow the fast boarding school, actively engage in the activities of the great days of Islam, come and help the victims of natural disaster, and so on. And the last is habituation, approach. In this approach, students must be compelled so that students can get used to realizing religious experience in the form of Islamic morality, even if it is necessary to also be used as material or graduation evaluation material for them. To finish it, I will explain about strategies of Islamic internalization in schools. The theory of value international strategies that is popular among education practice, practitioners includes: first is modeling strategy. This example has an important value is in Islamic education because it introduces good behavior through example, as well as understanding the value system in real form. The strategy by example is internalization by giving concrete examples to emulate children is an attitude that exists in Islamic education and has been practiced since the time of the Messenger of Allah. In education, the provision of these examples is highly emphasized because the behavior of an educator gets special observations from the students. Through this exemplary strategy, an educator does not directly include things related to that example in the learning plan, that is religious moral values such as dignity, honesty, sincerity, and responsibility instilled in British are something of hidden curriculum. Second is habitual strategy. The strategy is a repeated act that becomes easy to work with educating with exercise and habituation is educating by giving exercise and getting to use it every day. This reusable strategy is effective to teach to students. If the footage is used to good manners, it will be reflected in daily life. The third is Ibrah and Amthal strategies. Ibrah or taking lessons and Amthal or parables is question to take lessons from some exemplary stories, phenomena, events that occur both past and present. From here is from here from here it is expected that the protege can take the wisdom that occurs in an event, whether in the form of sorry, whether in the form of calamity or experience. Abdullah al-Rahman al-Nahlawi defines Ibrah with a physic, physic condition that conveys man to know the essence of a matter witnessed, noticed, induced, weighed, measured, and decided logically, so that his conclusion can affect the heart, then encourage it to appropriate social thinking behavior. The pedagogical purpose of taking lessons is to lead people to the satisfaction of thinking about religious matters that can move, educate, or add to the religious feelings of the learners. Fourth is advice strategy. Rashid Rida as quoted by Burhanuddin, interprets the advice as a reminder of goodness and truth by any way that can touch the heart and rise it up to practice. The method of advice must contain three elements, namely a description of the goodness and truth that must be done by a person. For example, about manners, motivation to do good, and a warning about sin arises for himself and others. Last is strategy of delivering promises and threats, or as known as targhib wa tarhib. Targhib is a promise that is fulfilled and cleanses yourself of all its impurities and then proceeds to do righteous deeds. That is only for the sake of Allah. Tahrib is a threat to sin or wrongdoing, greatness and divine majesty, so that they are always carefully in acting. Education discipline strategy with discipline requires firmness and wisdom. Assertiveness, assertiveness means that an educator must sanction any offense committed by a protege, while the discretion requires a teacher to sanction to the type of violation without being overcome by emotion or other urges. Ta'zir is a punishment imposed on a child infringing education. This penalty is given to those who have repeatedly committed offenses regardless of the warning given. So let's go back to what we were discussing earlier. Just to summarize, the main point of my talk is the internalization of values is a process of instilling certain values that are the driving force for a person to act on the basis of his or her choice. There is also pattern of strategizing the internalization of Islamic religious values in schools or madrasa, namely exemplary approach, experience approach, habituation approach. There are also forms of strategies to internalize Islamic religious values in school or madrasa, namely exemplary modeling strategy, habitual strategy, the strategy of Ibra and Amthal, advice strategy, strategy of delivering promise and threats, or known as targhib wa tarhib. Well, this brings me to the end of my presentation. Thank you all for listening. Just to summarize, the main topic of my presentation today is about the understanding of the internalization of Islamic values and about approach and internalization of Islamic values and strategies of Islamic internalization in school. I have time for a few questions. I'll be happy to answer your questions that you may have. Are there any questions? If there is no any questions, I'll end up with reciting Hamdalah. Thank you all for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.